Hi everyone, so I wanted to paint a little demo here today, and this place is a special place to me. My daughter and I hiked here a few years back. This is the Anza Borrego Wilderness State Park in California, and I believe it's the largest state park in the United States, if I'm remembering correctly. I'll have to look at that and see if I was right, but I loved this scene because of the light and shadow, and because it gives a little bit of the feeling of the vastness of that desert area. So those are the things that drew me to paint this, and I want to keep that in mind as I put the paint to paper. I zoomed in, turned this black and white, and then zoomed in to see if I'd like it a little bit closer up, but I felt like it took away from the feeling of the paint of the picture, because it eliminated those far distant hills and just kind of cut the shadows down. I don't like the zoomed in version, so I'm going to work from the colored photo because it has the full view, and just keep in mind the values. This is a good way to check your values and just see where they are and what they look like. This really zeroes it into light, medium, and dark. And those are the things that are good to focus on when you're painting a picture, painting a scene. So with that said, I'm going to get my Escoda number 10 rigger Versatil and mix up a little cobalt blue for my sky, and just go in with no line drawing. Get a little bit more, a little bit more. I want to have more than enough so I don't have to go back in and mix up more. So I've got my board tipped up just a little bit, just so I can have some gravity helping me out. Loading my brush up nice and thick with paint, and then I can come back and dilute that, which that seemed a little bit too dark. So I'm just gonna work around the mountain range back there and not worry too much if it's just exactly right or not. That's not what I'm worried about. I want the feeling of the place, and so that is what I want to focus on. And getting that sky in there, tipping my board to move that paint around so it doesn't puddle up and blossom where I don't want it to. A little bit of that happening along the edge as it dried. Kind of encourage a little bit of flow here to take some of that pigment off. I feel like that was a little bit dark. Even though it's going to dry lighter, I know that it might not be as light as I want. That just keeps on wanting to blossom on me. And that's because the paint is drying, and then there's wet under the tape pushing back into that dry. That's what's causing that to happen, which I could, you know, if my painting was satisfactory and I felt like it was worthy of framing, I could always crop out some of that edge. So that I feel like is going to be okay as far as the sky goes. It's nice and blue. A couple of broken edges in there. It's okay. I'm not worried about it. So I'm going to let this dry on its own after I feel like I can stop babysitting it. Sometimes you have to kind of watch it and make sure that blossoms aren't happening where you don't want them to. Sometimes in the sky they can be nice, but this is more of a clear sky with not a lot of cloud. So blossom wouldn't suit that very well. Okay, so I think that's going to be okay for me to let sit here and dry for a while. And once it's dry, I'll come back in and add the warm sunlit areas of those distant hills. This might be just a little bit too high, but now that the sky is dry, it's time to come in and work on those mountains. And I want to scoot this blue out of the way a bit so I can mix up a nice clean color for them. And I have a little bronzite. I want to use that. Bronzite Genuine is a Daniel Smith Primatech. I think that's how you say it, color. And it's got some really cool sparkle in it because of the minerals that it's made from. So I'm going to mix that with some Mars Yellow and start on those distant mountains. This one is further back, so I want to kind of keep that looking like it's in the distance. So I'm going to kind of make the details smaller, keep it a little bit lighter, get some Indian yellow, because some areas do have just the touch of sun on them. So I want to remember that that's one of the things I was wanting in this painting, was the feeling of the light. Now I'm just getting a little bit of kind of a darker shadow mixture, so I can touch that in. That's a little bit too gray, but not too bad. That's better. And I'm just going to touch that in a little bit here as I'm working, so it has a chance to kind of come up into that. I want to keep all those details fairly small though, so they don't jump out forward at me or you or whoever. A little bit more blue in there. Tone down that purple a bit. Oh my goodness. Splatter. It's a little bit more warm. And same in here. Really wanting to preserve that brightness and get the feeling of the distance. I can see that sparkling. I don't know if you can. You may not be able to see it, but it's really beautiful. That Bronzite Genuine. I just have started experimenting with the Primatech. I do believe that's how you say it, Primatech colors. And I just love the way they granulate. That's always been one of my favorite parts of painting in watercolor, is the granulation that happens with some of the paint colors. It's really beautiful. A little bit more, a little thicker in this so I can keep the brightness there. Just going to soften that as I come down and let it just kind of flow there for a minute while I move over here to this closer mountain, hill, if you will. using some dry brush strokes there too, to keep the brush kind of skipping over some of the peaks of the paper. Give it a little bit more detail. So then I think I'll just soften so I can come over the top of that. That's still pretty wet, so I think it'll be okay. Hope it'll be okay to come over the top of that with some of this manganese blue and throw in a little bit of burnt orange. As I go, just kind of brushing that in so I get a different look that way than if I'd mixed them on the palette. Get a little bit more of my shadow mixture and keep coming down with that. I'm trying to work fast, but think slow. I guess I want to really think about what I'm doing, but I know that I have a limited amount of time to get this color on there where it's going to blend and flow together. Splattery. And once that paper starts to dry into the more of a damp than a moist, then you're in the danger zone of causing all kinds of blossoms and things you don't really want to see necessarily in there. So it's important to kind of know when to stop. And I think I might be at that stage. I don't want to go any further on this until it's completely dry. Then I can come back over and do a little bit of layering. But I like where I am so far at this point, and I don't want to mess with that. I like how it's granulating in here and flowing together really nicely and softly. The only thing I can think that maybe a little more of the color here would be nice. And I think I'm still okay. We'll see what happens. I may be wrong, but I may be right. Isn't that a Billy Joel song? Okay, so now I really am gonna let it have a chance to sit and settle and see where I think I want to take it next. So I'm gonna call it good for right now and then give it a chance to dry. Well, I really, really like some of what's going on here, a lot of what's going on here actually. The paint has dried really nicely. I've got a lot of softness going on here, and I can come in with another layer now that it's dried. I think what I want to do is come back here and just get a little detail going, try to keep it simple and like it's in the distance, and then come forward as I go. I love the granulation here, and I did say I was using manganese blue earlier, but it is actually manganese violet that I'm mixing in some places with cobalt blue and a little touch of Daniel Smith quinacridone burnt orange, which is a color that it's like a staple on my palette. I love that color. So those are some of the colors I've used, and now Now is time to come in and finish up this painting and really remind myself of what it was that I started loving this scene for, which was the light, the shadows, and the lengthening shadows, and just really wanting to keep it simple and not get too caught up in the details over here. I just want to really add some softer shadows back there and not get carried away, which is sometimes hard to do. And let me see if I can think of this quote. Many good paintings are ruined when I say to myself, if I just do this, and then it's all over. I've gone past a point where I was happy and then thought I could be happier maybe, and added more, and it didn't add more. It really kind of ruined the freshness. So I want to stay away from doing that, making that mistake. And I'm switching over brushes. I've been using the Versatil by Escoda number 10 round rigger. This is a number 8 Prado. I think that's how you say it. Number 8 Prado. It's Alvaro Castanet's signature collection, and it's really nice. I do have to say on the Escoda brushes, the sizing is different, and I think that really holds true in the different brands for the most part. They're not always going to be the exact same size. It's not going to be the exact same number 8 that a Princeton might be. So this is a little bit smaller number 8, which is nice because I'm going to be using the tip back in those distant hills. So I'm going to get kind of a grayed down mixture of the shadow that I've been working on here. Maybe a little bit more on the blue side. And then again, just keeping it a little bit more diluted back here. I want to just come over the top of that so I have a continuing line. And then I can decide if I want to put a little bit more in, which I did in that case. And just really try to stay away from getting hung up in the detail. And I just grabbed a little bit more of that manganese violet. Sometimes you adjust, and if you drop in a little extra of another color, it kind of is nice to the look, and soften that up a little bit. Just want to come over the top of that, add a touch more of the raw sienna. I think that's yellow ochre though. I actually went out and got myself some more raw sienna because I was out, and it's a little bit more transparent than the yellow ochre. So one thing about more opaque colors, I stayed away from those in the early days of learning because they do tend to mix up a little bit muddier. So when you're first learning, it's really easy to mix mud. You get kind of in this place where you're not looking at the color and thinking, oh, I like that, so you keep adding and adding and adding. And really, I remember, can't remember who it was that taught this, but it made a lot of sense that you don't want to really mix more than 3 colors to keep it fresh and bright. So I'm going to bring that up a little bit. This is going to dry a little bit lighter. So I'm going to make that a little more of my shadow color instead of the sky. And just bring it down. And come underneath this too, it's still fairly wet. Soften that. hopefully I'm okay there. Looks like it's okay. And I added a little bit more burnt orange. And now I'm gonna let that dry and come back after it's dry. And because I think it's just on that, in that danger zone, it's on its way from moist to damp, and I risk causing some blossoms and issues that I don't want to see. I want this line to be fairly hard edge, so I want to let this dry before I go back in and work on it. But in that time, I can come over here to this guy and start working on some shadowing. And again, the same colors, the burnt orange mixed in with the manganese violet and the blue. I do like that combination for some gray color, some shadow color, and just gonna really randomly put in some strokes of color and pull down here and there and just see what this, where this takes me. I think I want a little bit more blue in there rather than having it quite so gray. Touch more of that violet. There we go, that's better. Like that. And I think I'll even drop in a little bit more of that violet in here. I'm really not trying to copy this. The more I focus on copying, the less I'm going to pay attention to just the feeling of it. So I'm going to touch in some more of that yellow ochre while that's still wet enough. Here too. Soften those a little bit. Soften that. I just loved the look out here. It's such a beautiful area. If you're ever in this area and you're a hiker, you just want to go out and explore, this is a really cool area. There's one part of this area out in Anza Borrego where they have all these amazing, oh gosh, metal sculptures, I guess. I can't remember the name of the artist that did them, but they are super cool. Just grabbing a little bit of, I think that was Indian red. It's been sitting on my palette. I'm not sure if that's what it was, but just gonna come down a little bit with that hill. Soften that a little bit. Anyway, there's like big giant like dragons, and one area has wild horses, I think that was, and just very cool. Gigantic, like very cool. So a lot of work went into that. Okay, so far I'm liking the feeling I'm getting here of this, the shadows, so I don't want to do too much more. Maybe I'm going to darken up this ochre color. I'm going to add that manganese violet into the yellow ochre to give some little lighter shadowing here. let it kind of bleed. I do like that actually. It was a good choice. And just really adding some random brush strokes there. Now as this dries a little bit more, I think I'm going to strengthen the shadow, and then it's still at that point where it's moist enough that it's going to soften. But I'm going to get a little bit darker and still have the softer edge that I'm looking for over here. Okay, I think I want to darken that a little bit. That'll help that mountain pop forward. And strengthen that a little bit. See how easy it is to come back and get carried away. I don't want to do that though. I want to just kind of be a little more minimalistic in this, and then hopefully we're going to see that effect that I'm looking for. So now I grabbed a little bit of Indian yellow that I'm going to mix with the yellow ochre, because I want just a little bit more brightness in here than just the yellow ochre was giving me. Pull it even more into the foreground. All right, so at this point I'm gonna say let's let this kind of sit and percolate. So I love coffee. And then come back to it and see about adding these foreground shadows. So I want to show you what I'm doing real quick while this is still drying. Is I wanted to give a little, lift a little bit of the highlight out here. And the way I'm doing that is with this stiff bristle Winsor & Newton brush. And it's more made for acrylics and oils, but I find that it's really helpful if I want to lift out highlights. And on this paper, which is a Hanamule, you have to be pretty careful because it is surface sized, and what that means is that when you're lifting, you're also lifting out some of that sizing, which can cause a problem if you are not careful, or if you lift too much, it's gonna pill. And that definitely I've seen happen with this paper. And so I'm trying not to do too much there, but I just wanted a little bit of lifting. So now I'm gonna go ahead and I think this is dry enough. So I'm gonna go back to my Versatil Rigger number 10 by Escoda and mix up that same mixture that I used previously. And I also have some, I don't want to get too dark in here is the thing. I want to have a good strong shadow, but I don't want it to be so dark here in the foreground. I kind of like seeing that granulation, so I want to be aware of that and come quickly in here with my cobalt violet light and add that as this upper shadow is still wet. That's what I used previously, and I did have some lavender in there as well, which I'll have ready to go so I can stroke that in. And a little more of that. So let's see if I've got it dark enough. I don't want to have to go over this again because that's going to cause the freshness that I'm going for to disappear. So I need to make sure to have enough paint mixed up and ready to go. That will help me a lot. So, and also just a little bit of the burnt sienna, or not burnt sienna, burnt orange, ready to go all by itself, as well as this raw ochre. So as long as those are ready to go on my palette, I can just go right back over, put a stroke of shadow down, and then come right in with a different color, and they will blend together beautifully. So, okay, so this is where it kind of takes a little bit of guts. Just to start, I'm gonna come over here and I like the direction that the landscape is going. It kind of has this direction of line. And I don't want to lose some of the edges, but some I do want to be a little bit, I want to have a little bit of softness there. So I can just stroke my color into that. Now I'm going to continue down with my mixture, and I lost my puddle of cobalt violet light. There it is. And then come back into it. While it's nice and juicy wet, I can add some of that burnt orange. That might have been a little too much, so I'm going to come back over it with a little bit of that, and the cobalt violet light is pushing back up into that. And I'm going to get some of that lavender mixture with the cobalt violet light. And I want a soft edge on this little area. A little bit more lavender. Not quite like that shadow, but that is okay. I'm really just wanting to get the feeling. If the shadow isn't exactly like that, it is not a big deal. We're just going for the feeling. I'm liking that soft edge there, so I think I'm going to leave it at that and then let this dry and come back in with some just tiny little details of some scrubby bushes coming up into that. So I really like the way this is looking, and so let's let it dry and come back and do some finishing touches. So I want you to have a look at this, see if you can see that. Such beautiful granulation in this area here, and of course back here too. I love the way the color is just beautifully blending together. I still feel like this shadow needs to be a little bit stronger, and I'm going to go back in here and strengthen some areas as well. But this is what happens when you lay a color down and then you don't keep on using your brush to try to get it to do something that you want it to do. When you just leave it to itself, you find that there's all kinds of beautiful granulation that will happen depending on the paint and the paper that you're using. So it's really, to keep it fresh, it's really a good idea to just do a brush stroke and then another brush stroke underneath and let those colors just blend together on their own. So I feel like I want to strengthen the yellows, the sunlit areas of this hill back here, and strengthen this shadow here. And then also I lifted out some highlights. I'm not extremely happy with the way that's looking, so I'm going to try to try not to overwork it, but see if I can't get those to kind of look a little bit more natural. So I'm going to start in that back area and just using some of my ochre, yellow ochre, come in here and strengthen some of the color. And back here as well. It's a little bit grayer, so I'm just going to add a little bit of cobalt violet light to that so it doesn't pop forward. I want it to stay in the background, but still just giving it a little bit extra oomph, you know. And same with this back here, just gray it down just a small amount. And then I think I want my number 10. I like how soft this is. So when I'm coming in here to do this, darken that shadow up, what I'm going to do is use the manganese violet still, but this time I'm going to strengthen it, darken it a little bit by using ultramarine blue rather than the cobalt, and just see if we can, oops, don't want that, see what happens here. So I want a little touch more water. I don't want it to get too dark, but I do want to strengthen that shadow back there. And that, hopefully that'll do it. I feel like that helped. And then the same thing goes for here. I want to be really careful to preserve my beautiful granulation there though. And so that being said, oops, I'm going to come over the top of it and then immediately come below that and soften that edge. So we've got a nice hard edge there now, and I'm liking how that looks. Again, try not to get carried away there. So now I think I'll grab, I have a little Utrecht number 6 Sablette, and it's a nice, nice soft synthetic brush, holds a good amount of paint and water, but it'll work well in the area that I want to work over here, and hopefully keep my hand from resting in that wet paint. I think I'm okay though. So I just am going to add some shape to that. And same here, just kind of giving a tiny bit more detail. And depth, hopefully. I'm achieving that. Kind of risking overworking this a little bit. So trying to not do that, but sometimes it just happens and then you go, dang it, there I go again, I overworked it. and then I'll try again. I don't give up easily. So I love painting, so you know, if I want to improve, I'm going to keep on trying. I'm not going to throw in the towel and give it up. If you give up, you'll never know what you can do. Okay, so looks like I'm gonna let it dry. I can probably start over here. It's dry enough to start adding some little brush work, little scrubby brushes, and I've got a little #1 Robert Simmons rigger, longer bristle. It helps me to stay looser, so I'll hold it down on the end and get some little twigs. And I want to kind of, let's see, I want to clean this up a little bit. I can't really focus. I'm not good at working in a mess. So sometimes that's a curse and sometimes it's an advantage. So, okay, I want to get some brush or some brushy shrubs in here. So I'm going to start with my favorite color, and I'm going to get a mixture of carbazole violet, which is a Daniel Smith color as well. That's going to be a nice dark branch. Then I want to vary up the colors in my twigs that are coming up here so it doesn't get boring. It looks really natural if the twigs are a little bit differing in color. So I'm just gonna squiggly. That was a little wet, but that's okay. Some of them are gonna be a little blurrier, you know. I think I want a little magenta too, mixed in with my ultramarine blue, give me a kind of darker little purple. And I think it'd be nice all by itself too, actually. And it's kind of fun to give it some movement. You know, maybe the wind was blowing and causing these branches to kind of flow in different directions. So I'm liking that. And then I think over here, I'm going to start with the darker because it's darker in value and see what happens. Grab some of that blue, violet. And what would be nice in here is a little bit of lavender. This has some of that lighter value, and the lavender is an opaque, so I may be able to get some. Yeah, see, you can see that it covers, it's a little bit thicker of a mixture. I don't have it diluted very much, so it'll come right over the top. Oops. Right over the top of that. And I bet I can do that with this yellow ochre too and get that color to come down in here and give some variety. Doesn't show up too much, but it's okay. Maybe Margello, that would be good. A little bit darker over here. And again, I don't want to get too carried away with too much detail. But as I'm speaking, hang on. Don't use white in watercolor too much, but I'm finding there's a place for it sometimes. So I'm going to add a little bit of Chinese white to my lavender. And just come and do a little scrubby work. But I don't want to overdo it, and this was just a lesson in doing a simple landscape and keeping focus on what I intentionally wanted to do, which was light and shadow and value, and keeping the distance, which I feel like I did a pretty good job with. I feel like these could probably be a little bit like shorter, and it would have created a little bit more depth. But basically that's the idea. I don't want to get overcomplicated here, so I'm going to call it quits, and I would just sign my name to this and call it good. Probably do this scene again just to maybe change it up and work on trying to get those even more distant. But if I tried to keep working on this, it would just lose some freshness, and I think I was, like I said, in danger of that in these hills, but that's okay. We got the idea of the point that I was trying to get across. So until next video, thanks for watching.